Welcome to Choose Views with Richard Chew. Get ready to dive into a world of insightful conversations and thought-provoking discussions.
As progressives, our job is to have an all-inclusive, full-on assault with all of our players.
A show that focuses on moving our political, social, economic, gender, and cultural conversation forward.
And all of our players means all of our players.
It's Choose Views. And now, here's your host, Richard Chew.
Good Friday morning, political fighters. Welcome to the June 26, 2026 edition of Choose Views, 773-763-9278. Find my show on Facebook Live, TuneIn Radio, YouTube. Of course, email me at richard@wcpta20.com and follow me on all the socials under Choose Views. Catch me, I should say catch all of our shows by subscribing to our WCPT podcast on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Amazon, and iHeartRadio. There you can get Choose Views featured interviews. Joan Esposito, live, local, and progressive, Driving It Home with Patty Vasquez. It's a Democracy, Stupid with Edwin Eisendrath. And, of course, Out Chicago and our other great shows and interviews. Make sure in the evenings, guys, that you're checking out the Politics Bar, the Matt McNeil Show, and the Gailey Show. And by all means, as we always say, make your way over to heartlandsignal.com. A couple of real quick what's happenings over at Heartland Signal. In Battleground, Wisconsin, GOP candidate David Daniels endorses a near total abortion ban. Wow. Wisconsin is our neighboring state here in Illinois. Not a resident there, can't vote there, but my goodness, folks up in Wisconsin, talk about Republicans always run around. We're the ones that are the small government. A bunch of BS, right, Henry? I mean, they want to ban the total ban. That's the government majorly. That's them running in the room and stomping with both feet. That's not small government. A total ban, a near total ban. So the near total ban is then up to the discretion of the government to determine what will be allowed, which means the government is still in that bedroom and in that family's life. And candidly, it's probably going to be decided on by a bunch of individuals that can't actually, give birth to it, carry a child for 9 months and give birth to that child. Men. So government, stay the hell out of people's bedrooms, out of their women's bodies, etc. Meanwhile, back at the ranch, on the other side of this conversation, J.B. Pritzker, on the anniversary of the Dobbs decision, signs a Reproductive Health Records Privacy Act, which protects the private health records of women seeking reproductive care. Health care records exist to treat patients, not to surveil and punish them. Opposite ends of the similar conversation. That's really what that is. And one other, and this is all over at Heartland Signal. This is why you guys have to make your way over there. Illinois Governor J.B. Pritzker says Donald Trump's offer to make Chicago safe, quote, again, is a joke. And it is. Quote, this is the president who wants to blame everybody else for algae that showed up at the reflecting pool in Washington, D.C. I don't think we need to be looking to him for any good ideas. Right on, Governor Pritzker. So make your way over to Heartland Signal. That's where all the good stuff is. On today's show, we're running fast. As always, we might be able to squeeze some calls in on topic today because of what we're going to be covering. Our good friend Karen Byrne is going to make a quick pit stop with us today and around the 6:20 time just to chat. She'll be calling in briefly today because here we go. In the 6:30 hour, our first guest will be the chair of the Michigan Democratic Party, Curtis Hurdle, who will be joining us at 6:30. Kevin Schultz, professor of history at the UIC and author of Why Everyone Hates White Liberals, including white liberals, will be here for our next segment of America 250 and talking about history. Be joined by Ronnie Grinberg, who is the associate professor of history and core faculty member at the Schusterman Center for Judaic-Israeli Studies at the University of Oklahoma, of all places. She'll be joining us with Professor Kevin in the 7 o'clock hour, and then in the 7:30 hour, we'll keep the train moving. Barbara McQuaid will be with us, legal analyst, law professor, and former United States attorney for the Eastern District of Michigan. Will be joining Professor Kevin and I. So we got a bunch of professors today. It's a lineup of educational folks. So we've got that happening today on the show. Again, Karen will be with us shortly. Curtis Hurdle will be with us at 6:30. Professor Schultz and Professor Grinberg will be with us at 7. And Professor Schultz will still be with us along with Professor McQuaid. So I'm probably going to make a few mistakes today in calling the names correctly, but we've got a great group of folks that are going to be with us to talk about history of religion, history of reform, history of churches, history of faith, and a history of law, of course, with Barbara McQuaid. So there you go. That's what's happening in those spaces. Whoa. All right. Question of the day. Oh, and by the way, happy Friday to my man Henry, who keeps us on the rails. And happy Friday to my man Matty B, who decided to land his plane. He's going to take down that sign. I know he will, because I got to be able to see him. He'll take you guys. If you watch the show on Facebook Live or what's that other place? YouTube. Thank you, Henry. See, I told y'all I was going to need some help today. You see me look over to my right. There's Matty B back there. There we go. Filling in for Mike Mercado, who's taking a couple of days to kind of re-energize. Always good to have our team here. We don't do this alone. Question of the day. What advice do you have for recognizing fake news, propaganda, and other misinformation and disinformation? Again, what advice do you have for recognizing fake news, propaganda, misinformation, and disinformation? With that being said, we're going to take a quick break, and that's our question for the day. Make sure you give us a call or send us a text. And always make your way over to our Facebook page and leave your comments there. The number is 773-763-9278. You are listening to Choose Views on WCPT, AM 820 in Chicago, 1520 AM, 103.5 FM for our folks down in Warren County, North Carolina, and AM 950, the progressive voice of Minnesota. I'm Richard Chu, and we will be right back. Hey guys, welcome back to Choose Views. If you are just tuning in, give us a shout. Let us know your thoughts about our question of the day about misinformation and fake news. How do you decipher? How do you determine? What's your I guess the word I would use is barometer. What advice do you have for recognizing fake news, propaganda, misinformation, and disinformation? How to recognize it? What do you there you go. Couple of quick items that are happening today. Live, local, and progressive. Joan Esposito will be taking your calls and talking to Chris Swartz, Senior Ethics Counsel at Democracy Defenders Fund. And out Chicago host Scott Duff and film critic Rebecca Ford on their monthly look at movies, TV, and a lot more. It's live, local, and progressive. Weekdays 2 to 5 here on WCPT, AM 820, heartlandsignal.com, and tune in. Tonight on Driving It Home, Patty will be joined by Merrill Miller, Market Manager for Jefferson Park Sunday Market, Tim Tarrant, Vice President of Commuter and Passenger Services for the Brotherhood of Railroad Signalmen, and the Honorable Michael Weaver and Honorable Mary Rubio, Circuit Court judges and members of the Illinois Association of Illinois Judges. Let's see. Tomorrow on It's the Democracy Stupid with Edwin Eisendrath. I'll be talking to Jen Bendery, Senior Politics Reporter for HuffPost, Lisa Graves, founder and executive director of True North Research, Adam Klasfeld, founder and editor-in-chief of All Rise News, and Virginia Cantor, chief counsel and director of anti-corruption and ethics for the Democracy Defenders Fund. On Monday, here on Choose Views, I'll be joined by Illinois Congresswoman Robin Kelly and Bobby Kogan, senior director of federal budget policy at the Center for American Progress. Together, we will be talking about the disastrous One Big Beautiful Bill as we approach the 1-year anniversary of its signing. Also next week, we'll be taking your calls on a series of themes related to America's sequicentennial. I got that right the first time. Whew. I practiced, y'all. I am not exaggerating. I did practice. And talking to former USAID official and author Nicholas Heinrich, Congresswoman Yvette Clarke, chair of the Congressional Black Caucus, author and founder of the States Project Daniel Squadron, legal scholar and activist Gloria Brown Marshall, Professor Kevin Schultz. So that's what's happening. Obviously, join me 6 to 8 Monday through Fridays. Pass it on to the folks you know. And if you want to watch the live stream, you can do that on Facebook and YouTube. And, also make sure you grab the podcast. You can get all the featured interviews, the full episodes. They're available on Apple, Spotify, TuneIn, iHeart, YouTube, and, of course, Amazon Music. Tomorrow, I will be a part of the 5th annual Ida B. Wells Festival. It's the Bronzeville Black Metropolis National Heritage group that's putting all this on. The event is free and takes place between 9 and 6:30, and it's open to all. From 3 to 4:30, I'll be moderating a panel discussion at the Illinois Tech campus, 10 West 35th Street here in Chicago. It's called The Long Fight to Gain and Retain Voting Rights, and we refuse to go back. Panelists will include Devorah Crable, Dr. Anthony Douglas, and Dr. Thomas Fisher of the University of Chicago, as well as Congresswoman Robin Kelly. To register and attend, please visit blackmetropolis.org. Click on the Ida B. Wells banner. Hope to see you there. So that's what's happening over the next couple of days, next week. Sunday is Pride Parade here in Chicago, which a lot of people are excited about. And I think, Henry, the weather is going to hold up. I checked the weather this morning, as I do all the time. And when I say hold up, I mean it's going to be dry. It might be a little warmer, but it'll be dry. I'd rather be hot. I almost said something. I'd rather, Matt even, I can see the smile on Matt's face from here. I would rather have the rain not be there and get warm and sweaty from the sun than to get rained on the entire time. Boy, I almost said something else. Whew, bad man. All right, guys, let's bring on our good friend Karen Byrne from True Blue Politics Podcast, who decided to land her helicopter a little bit earlier with us this morning. Good morning, Karen. How are you doing?
I'm doing great, Richard. How are you doing? Thanks for having me in.
Absolutely. I almost said something goofy a moment ago, which would have made everybody just probably snort up their coffee, but there you go. Oh, goodness gracious. I got to, there's a lot to talk about, but I've got to ask you about something that I don't know if you saw yet or not, but it's kind of making the waves. Caroline Leavitt is back at the podium, and she's off of maternity leave, and I'm glad she's got a healthy baby.
She spawned after being she spawned.
Yes.
Okay, let's just call it what it is.
I'll let the ladies trash talk in that way. I'm just going to say I'm glad she had a healthy baby, and just stay out of let the women and the families in Gaza have their healthy babies.
It's probably for the best, Richard.
Yeah, I can't. I don't. There's certain places I don't go as a guy because I know better by now. But shifting from that to Idiocracy, did you see this? I'm going to read it to you, and I'm going to read this to everybody. I've been waiting to bring this to you, Karen, because I know you can't stand her. Okay, this is what she said. Quote, under President Trump, the U.S. unemployment rate is at a historic low of just 4.3%. It was at a dismal rate of 3.4% under Biden. Snark, snark. Did you guys catch that? I'll read it again. Under President Trump, the U.S. unemployment rate is at a historic low of 4.3%. It was at a dismal rate of 3.4% under Biden.
Oh, she's not good at mathing.
That's what so many of the memes said. The math ain't mathing. I can't even tell you how many times when that was sent up. Okay, Caroline, either she's not good at mathing or she doesn't understand. So I tried to give her some room of favor here, Karen, and say, okay, what she was thinking was the employment rate, but it doesn't matter. Unfortunately, when you're snarky and you're the B word and you treat people with disrespect, you get a narrower fairway. You get a smaller runway. And for her to trash, talk the journalists that come in to try to get answers to questions, and she then says something like that, she either doesn't understand the unemployment calculation, the word, or she doesn't understand. She got the words mixed up, employment versus unemployment, Henry. But it doesn't matter. She doesn't get a wide berth here, Karen.
She's a ridiculous fool, and she is completely on brand for the Trump administration. Nothing idiotic that comes out of her mouth surprises me anymore. And, you were asking the question about how do you factor, how do you discern misinformation, disinformation? It is anytime a Republican's mouth, and in particular the Trump administration, anybody in the Trump administration's mouths or lips are moving, they're lying. So we can just get that out of the way right away. So it doesn't take a lot to figure out that you're being lied to if a Republican is speaking. And Caroline Leavitt she is a tool in the toolbox that is MAGA, that is a part of this cult, and she knows that all she has to do is play to Donald Trump, stroke his ego. And I think she's full on in the cult, but, they understand that all they have to do is say what they say, and their cult members are going to believe it 100% because they understand that they are poorly educated, that they are not the smartest people, that they are deplorable. And so as long as you throw out enough, racist red meat and sound those bullhorns, they're going to have people backing them and supporting them. The saddest part, and it's not, I don't know. I wanted to ask you, Richard, do you think that was a new record set by Bill Cassidy yesterday in his total and utter 180 and capitulation to Donald Trump? I thought Kevin McCarthy had it after, because he waited a week or two after January 6th before he went to Mar-a-Lago and stuck his head right up Donald Trump's big fat
backside
rear end. Yeah. What do you think?
Well, I'm going to go back to something that you said in response to my question about fake news and misinformation and disinformation. By design, I asked that question because I knew you and I were going to have a few minutes together, and this thing about Caroline Leavitt. I think it's sort of like every now and again, you and I'll have this conversation, and you and I and others, and you have it with other people as well, is that when there is a Republican that gets their head right and decides to do the right thing, they don't get a medal for doing the right thing. That's what they're supposed to do. They were elected by the people to go to Congress or to go to the state houses if it's a state legislator and do the work of the people. When they do that, they don't get a medal for it. And so what happens is we get, not you and I specifically, but all of us, I'm going to put us all in the same bucket. Every now and again, because they've been so awful, Karen, so flat out effing awful, that when they do something that is in the right direction for the people that elected them and the rest of the country, we kind of go, okay, great. That person is, for the moment, we all have done it. I've done it. We've all done it. But then what we also know in the back of our mind, that pinch on the back of our ear that goes, but they're going to trick you, right?
Yep.
They're seducing you in to come into the cave. It's safe in here. When you should sort of maybe stay outside the cave, even though you might get a little wet outside the cave, it's safe out there. But you go into the cave where it's dark with them and you get hoodwinked, you get bamboozled, you get the okie doke, the banana in the tailpipe, all those phrases. And that's kind of how I look at it. We have to still hold them with a certain, my mother said this for years when I was growing up, and sometimes I get away from it, and I have to remember this. There are some people, and right now it's the entire Republican Party of elected officials on a state level, on a federal level, and the GOP voters, Karen. I'm sounding preachy, but sometimes we've got to feed all of them with the long handle spoon, as my mother used to say.
Absolutely.
Because they cannot be trusted. And I know we want to see some bipartisanship or some things work together where we get stuff done. But every time we give somebody a little bit of favor, they turn around and they stab us in the back. And that's how my long-winded way of saying, responding to your question.
Yeah, no, I mean, look, but the thing that is so problematic with that is that the media immediately glommed onto that and immediately started giving, props and praise to Bill Cassidy for standing up to him. And, that was like such a big deal. And I mean, I literally, and I called into staff yesterday and I just said, okay, how long, we saw Mitch McConnell, we saw Kevin McCarthy, we saw Lindsey Graham, of all people, stand up there and call out Donald Trump and assess the blame for the terror attack on our Capitol on Donald Trump.
Yep.
It was his fault. And then they completely did a 180. Mitch McConnell refused to hold him accountable in the Senate by convicting him for his actions on January 6th. Kevin McCarthy, record time, ran over to Mar-a-Lago, kissed the ring. And then we have, of course, I mean, it's not surprising, then Joe Scarborough and Mika, and that should have been our little preview of how the media, by and large, was going to behave, like maybe not going to Mar-a-Lago and kissing the ring, but certainly being out there and kind of falling for the okie doke and passing on the okie doke to the audience. They have no respect for the audience. They have no sense of responsibility to be a check on power. And, here we are 1 day later, and Bill Cassidy has voted to give Donald Trump everything that he wants.
Yeah.
What was the point?
Having the shout, I mean, you're going to have the shouting match. See, Karen, why I got to talk to you about this stuff? Because you're going to get me riled up. But I do the same. I do the same to you. I'm like, dude, stand on business. If you're gonna have a shouting match with them, and if you believe that him having the war powers, having his war powers limited is the right thing, then stand on that business in public. Tell Donald Trump to kiss your behind. What is he gonna do to you? You got enough money to live on for another lifetime. Your family's probably gonna be fine, and you've lost your seat. So, dude, if you're going out the door, knock some stuff over. Let Donald Trump know. I mean, this is where I sometimes look at them and I go, you guys are a bunch of piebacks. If his fate is that he's no longer going to be a U.S. senator, then doggone it, you've got to have a better belief system than that. You've got to have a little bit more guts in that. And then to turn like that.
No, I agree. And it's, for me, okay, so for me, it's like, okay, who is he afraid of?
Right.
Now, I'm going to throw this out there because, look, Lawrence O'Donnell, actually, because he was a member of the Senate, and if for anybody that hasn't seen it, go back and watch his first segment. But he talks about the fact that, former senators will become lobbyists.
Yeah,
and the advantage that they have over the other lobbyists is that they can go on the floor of the Senate and lobby on the floor of the Senate.
Karen.
On behalf of the big corporations. So people want to know how this all works. That's how that works.
I got you.
And, anyway.
Okay. We got to go. You know that. Sorry to do that to you.
Right.
But have a great weekend. Okay. We'll talk to you soon, okay? Thanks,
all
Karen.
Right. All right. Have a great weekend.
You too. Bye-bye. 773-763-9278 is the number. Quick break. We'll be right back. All right, guys, welcome back to the show. This is Choose Views, and I'm Richard Chew. If you're just tuning in, thanks to our good friend Karen Byrne for hanging out with us for a little bit. I didn't mean to rush her through, but we had to get to our next segment and certainly get to our break. The politics in Michigan right now is exciting because there's so much going on. They've got some very, very important races. They've got local things that are happening. They've got some of the congressional races. They've got their governor's race. I mean, it's a lot happening in the great state of Michigan. And with us this morning is the chair of the Michigan Democratic Party, Mr. Curtis Hurdle. Good morning, Mr. Hurdle, and welcome to Choose Views.
Thank you, Richard. Proud to be on.
Thank you for being with us. We got another Michigander that'll be with us later in the show, Barbara McQuaid, professor at University of Michigan, attorney. You know her background and all that. So she's going to be with us later in the show. But I'm excited to have you on because Michigan is such an important state to all of us, and some people did not realize how important what's going on in Michigan is right now as it relates specifically to your governor's race, obviously, but we've got this big Senate race that's taking place. Just come through some, primaries that, like Illinois, have been rugged. So talk to us about kind of the big picture, that 10,000-foot view, if you will, of what's going on, what's happening with Michigan politics.
So this is the first time in Michigan history that we have an open governor's race, open U.S. Senate race, open Attorney General, open Secretary of State, every seat in the State House, the State Senate, enough competitive seats that we can flip Congress right through Michigan.
Yep. Isn't that crazy, though?
Supreme Court.
I'm sorry. Go ahead. I'm sorry, Curtis.
No, it's just, it is. I mean, I think that this is a challenge, but an opportunity. And, we have the opportunity to really be the tip of the spear, the response to what's happening in this country. And really, if you want to win the presidency in 2028, we got to win all these races in Michigan. If we don't have an attorney general that's suing Donald Trump and trying to make sure that we can protect our elections, same as the Secretary of State, so we have actual free elections, a governor that's going to make sure that the voting laws that we've passed to protect our right to votes here are intact, and to win a legislature that, I don't want just a governor's office. That's a goalie. I want to be able to go on offense and get things done for people. And so we have to take the State House back. We're down 3 seats. We hold the State Senate by 1. I mean, everything in Michigan is competitive. And the work that we're doing on the ground in organizing and rebuilding. I always say the Michigan Democratic Party, we don't pay consultants. We don't buy ads. We are the backbone, the people that are actually doing the work on the ground, which I think is even more important in today's elections, to be honest with you. I think door-to-door, hand-to-hand canvassing and listening is more important than a lot of the things we focus on in politics. So that all that work that is being done right now is being done to build towards it. But we have one of the latest primaries in the country. Yeah. We have competitive primaries. We don't get to know who our candidates are till the first week of August. And so we got a lot of work to do. But I feel good about what we're building here in Michigan. Yeah, we do too. I mean, the word that came to mind, I didn't want to interrupt you, is foot soldiers. Foot soldier work, when you talk about how Michigan really gets into it with regard to campaigning. And I think it's a lesson for the country, but certainly and specifically for Democrats that are running in other parts of the country, is to get out and talk to people. I'll take it back to last summer. I was talking with some of the folks in Iowa that had some special elections, their state legislative elections, and I asked the question: "And what is it that you're doing that's different?" And those who got elected in some of the special elections for the House and for the Senate, they all said the same thing, Curtis, which is we got out and talked to people. We got out and met with folks. We got out and had those conversations and knocked on the doors and met folks at coffee shops and repair shops and, all the rest of the things that are the everyday folk thing. And that's certainly what Michigan has been known for a long time. I mean, I think about, your father and your brother who were also elected officials and so it's kind of in your blood in terms of what the Hurdle family has done. But that the leadership that you're representing and showing right now is certainly letting people know this is how we get this done. And I think it's a good lesson for so many people in the country that are running for office on whatever level. What are your thoughts? Yeah, listen, I've been knocking doors since I was 4 years old in a little red wagon. I think I've probably hit so many quarters of the state. I came into the state Senate. We had 11 seats for the super minority. We had less members on the Wu-Tang Clan. We caucused in the elevator. And we rebuilt that to a majority for the first time in 40 years in Michigan. But it was hand-to-hand combat. It had to be doing the actual work on the ground, having those tough conversations. And I can tell you that when I I traveled around the state. We have 83 counties. I was in just under half of them last year doing that kind of work. We've rebuilt 2 state parties that didn't exist. I was in Iron County, Michigan. You got to drive through Wisconsin to get there.
Yep.
We had 50 people at a bar ready to do the work to get Democrats elected. It's about showing up. And I think that for a lot of times in Democratic politics, we have given up areas. We've given up ground to the Republicans. We've said, oh, yeah, those rural areas, we can't win those any longer. Well, that's changing. Yeah. I mean, what I'll tell you is that people are tired of broken promises. And what Donald Trump has given them is nothing but broken promises. That the health care costs would go down. That's a lie. That we'd be focused on rebuilding their lives. We gave tax cuts to billionaires while we increased cost of health care. These chaotic tariffs that have made it harder and harder for families to get ahead. Promised no foreign wars, and look what we're doing now. It's over and over again a promises broken to the people of Michigan. So I think a lot of places that we're frustrated and angry at the current economy, and it's true. Listen, we got to acknowledge the fact this economy is broken for average people. I mean, at the end of the day, in 1960, the average CEO made 50 times what their employee makes. Now it's 360 times. The fact that it's become harder, if you're this generation, it's the slowest generation in American history to buy a house, to buy a car, to start a family. And so we got to have answers to that. But at the same time, what Donald Trump did was he gave them a reason, right? He is nonsense and blame, but we've got to actually have real solutions, and we do, but we got to talk about it. And that's one of the things I think is frustrating sometimes, is that we as Democrats have a tendency to we have crazy fights, right? Like we talk about all these, we have all these arguments, whether we call them oligarchs or kings, and all the different parts of the windy big tent. But at the same time, what they do is they find ways to divide us.
Yeah. And
we have got to come together and say enough is enough, and what's happening in this country is wrong. And I think that I don't like labels of Democrats and everything else. We play all this time, progressive, establishment, all these other terms that I think what we really are, we are a party of working people that's fighting to make lives better for the average person, and that's what we're focused on. And that's at the best of the Democratic Party. That's who we are.
Yeah, and the thing that comes to mind for me is that the image of the working class person has, whether we want to admit it or not, or acknowledge it as there, has changed in a way that's very subtle. And that is because of the cost of things, universally, the people who used to be viewed as those that are making 6 figures and above, $150,000 a year, they're struggling as well. And the data backs that up. And that quote unquote economic class or economic group is recognizing probably more than ever before that their income isn't necessarily the one that they want or aspire to as well, because the cost of things has gone up. And in this last 18 months, they've seen it probably as much, if not more, than the families that are in that, let's say, $75,000 number, closer to what some of the national average numbers might represent. So we have, I think, a dual opportunity, Curtis. We have the opportunity to talk to the class, the income class, I should say, of people who have been given that sort of middle-income American number, the sort of stereotypical kitchen table crowd, but also the crowd that's above that income-wise, but maybe equally struggling, because they recognize that the promises from this administration, not just Donald Trump, but every single Republican, were the promise that they haven't delivered on. And I think that also we're seeing, because of the hard work that folks like you are doing and so many other strong state politicians and state leaders are doing, is it's showing that Republicans really aren't capable of delivering on those things. They're talking points, but they never really have been able to deliver on any of that. And that's where we have this, I think, massive opportunity to continue to expose it. We have to walk and chew gum. We have to do kind of what you said, identify what those problems are, and then show how we're going to deliver. And the third piece is who's going to benefit from it. I think that that's something that we have to really hold on to this time and be unforgiving and unapologetic about. We have better ideas, don't you think?
Oh, 100%. And I think that, I mean, we want to have to acknowledge the pain that people are experiencing. And I think that's a big part of it. And it's actually, that's good for us, actually, because Democrats do have empathy. We are people that actually care about others and care about their future. And I think that too often we as Democrats have not fought back enough against what these Republicans are doing and what they're saying and everything else. I think that we just people see us. They like some of our ideas. They just think that we're weak. And that's one of the big things. We've got to be able to be strong and respond back to their attacks. We got to be willing to, when we have power, not be afraid to use it. I think that that's one of the big things that, in Michigan, why is Governor Whitmer so popular? The answer is, we had a trifecta. We passed the largest tax cut for working families in history, brought 30,000 kids out of poverty. We were the first state in 70 years to restore workers' rights and get rid of right to work. We had the largest investment in housing and education, free breakfast and lunch for every kid. And it's about both having the right talking points, obviously, but talking about the right things, but also about actually doing things to get things done to make people's lives better when we're in power.
Yeah, and I think the final part to that, and we're going to take a quick break, is we have to then illustrate, and here's how it's going to help you. That's the part that's the button up on that. Here's the problem, here's what we're going to do to fix it, and here's how it's going to help you. When we add that part, then people can go, oh, I get it. They actually can put themselves in the driver's seat of what we gotten done as a party. Let's take a quick break. We're talking with Curtis Hurdle, who is the chair of the Democratic Party in Michigan. I'm excited to talk to him, Henry. 773-763-9278 is the number. I'm Richard Chu, and we'll be right back. All right, guys, welcome back to Chu's Views. If you were just tuning in, I'm Richard Chu, and we are talking with the chair of the Democratic Party in Michigan, Curtis Hurdle. Thank you so much for being with us this morning. One of the things that's happening right now, and as it relates to voting groups, is there's this conversation out there that younger voters are not as inspired, that the Trump world grabbed younger voters. Okay, let's just say all that's true. Let's say the younger voters felt disenfranchised in 2024. But what we're seeing and have seen in these specials and these off-year elections in the last year, certainly, is that younger voters are driving the narrative. They're driving the conversation. So in Michigan, which is oftentimes probably viewed as an older state until you get to a college campus and go, oh, there's a lot of young folks here. What are you doing? What are you saying to your Democratic colleagues there? We have to continue to do a better job of as it relates to the youth vote.
We have a lot of work to do from the last election. We did lose a lot of young people in the last election, and I think that a lot of that is a lack of hope that people had. I mean, they see that their lives are harder than their parents were, and that even whether they went to college or not, that the opportunities just aren't there in the same way. And there's a real frustration to that. Like I said before, it's the youngest generation to buy a car, the oldest generation to buy a car and start a family, buy a house. And it's not cultural. It's because the economic system does not work for young people. And in Michigan, we have a lot of energy with young people. We had the largest convention in Michigan history, and it was the youngest convention I've ever seen, which was amazing. At Michigan State University, in East Lansing, where I live, we have the largest college Democrats chapter in the country at MSU. And so we're seeing a lot of energy on the ground there. And really, it's about talking about how we fix the problems. I mean, like there is a lack of hope. And hope is a really powerful thing. And when people, there's a line in the movie American President that if you don't give people water, they'll drink sand.
Yep.
Trump is sand. He is anger. He is division. But that's our fault that he won. And I think we have to acknowledge that as Democrats, by the way. We didn't run a good enough campaign. We've got a responsibility to go out and make those arguments back. We have to get people back. We have to have the grace to allow people back. And especially these young people who have been lied to. And so...
But part of my pushback on that, and it's pushback in a forward-moving way, we did tell people. I listened to it. I watched it. I heard it. I was part of the conversation. We did tell people. We did say that. These are the things that are going to happen under this administration. We made it perfectly clear. And one of the things that I have to really, stand up for is at some point, people have got to stop fooling themselves and say, wait a minute. That was out there, and maybe it wasn't in the way, with the spoon that I wanted. I wanted a teaspoon, and it came in a tablespoon. Okay, okay, yeah. But it was served up, and a lot of people, a lot of it was cultural too. A lot of it was gender. They chose not to go in that direction because we had too much information in the information sphere that I'm making up a word, but people did not go, we're going to do this again with the same guy.
And I agree with everything you're saying there. What I would say is, though, on the opposite end, just for a second, we started the campaign trying to tell people the economy was getting better, and it worked for them. And most people know that the economy does not work for them. And so I think that we've got to have an economic message that actually speaks to that as well. And that's my thing is that we as Democrats have a tendency not to celebrate the things that we actually do. We passed the Affordable Care Act, and
we're quiet about it.
Barack Obama, and then Democrats, ran against it. Barack Obama runs back for re-election and says, "No, let's call it Obamacare. This is what it's going to do for people," and he wins handedly. And that's
there's my point. This is what it's going to do for people. This is how it's going to help you.
We didn't do that this last election. I mean,
we didn't. If I have any like, not complaint, but if I had one thing that I was saying along about what I wanted President Biden and the administration to do is get out there and talk about all the great stuff that we're doing, laundry listed every single day. Here's what we're doing. Here's who it's benefiting and why. And that's the thing that, yes, I would agree that we didn't do enough of that. But the other side of that, or to round this out, we made it clear that Donald Trump's reelection was going to be destructive to the country, if not the world. And a lot of people bought into crazy things like they're eating cats and dogs. And they bought into folks coming from across the border are taking your stuff. When in fact, the people that are taking your stuff are the dudes and dudettes sitting in the C-suites that are redirecting our economy. So we're both saying the same thing. Yeah. As we go forward, Curtis, one of the things that I want to ask you, this is you hit on something earlier about young folks feeling discouraged. One of the things that I think is that we have to start earlier with helping them feel like part of the mix. Mayor Johnson here in Chicago gets criticized for being focused on our youth, our teenagers, making sure that they're a part of the process, that they've got things to do, that they feel like their futures are going to be bright. And I think that we have to be able to create the programs that do that for our teenagers of all communities, and our college kids and our young adults, because then they see the pathway is like the steps make sense. Does that make sense how I'm saying that?
Oh, I 100% agree. I mean, we suffer in this country from the diseases of despair, especially among young people. I mean, suicide is the number 3 cause of death among adolescents. It's the only one going up. And there is this feeling that the world is never going to work for them. And there's lots of reasons for it. I mean, obviously the economy has gotten much harder for people. Yeah. I think social media has been in many ways a poison for young people. They see all this they
This
see
fake
the
greatness.
good parts of everybody's day and everything else. Yeah, this, why don't I have that? Because everyone else seems very happy.
Yeah.
And I have 4 kids. 3 are in college, 1 in high school. It's a tough time to be a kid. It really is a tough time to be a kid in this world.
Yeah.
And but I think that when you have despair, there are 2 ways you can turn. You can turn towards hope, or you can turn towards blame.
Yeah.
And I think that when Donald Trump said, "There's a reason why you're not doing well, and here's the reason," and he found a reason to point to, and whether it was demonizing trans kids or demonizing immigrants or those divides. I mean, like that is how great countries fall, by the way.
Yep.
Is when the people, especially the young people, run out of access to hope. And so we've got to be inspirational in what we're talking about and trying to and have actual programs and plans and investment in those young people. I will tell you that I am heartened every single day as I travel around the state. I get to see young people that, despite all the things I just said, are interested in politics. They're interested in issues. They care passionately about what they care about, and they're willing to step up and do the work to try to make this country better. And I just think that sometimes we as Democrats, we have a tendency to tell people to wait their time.
I think the
when the building's on fire,
yeah, you can't wait to put it out.
You can't tell them to wait to get it out, right? Yeah. I mean, we need all the help. So I think that there is a big responsibility of us to provide spaces for these young people, to provide to take advantage of the energy that they have, and not just see where they're trying to drag in all honesty, the energy on the Democratic Party has always been among young people. That's the history of who we are too. So I think it's really important that we actually are honoring that and getting and using and promoting that help.
One of the things I want to do, because we didn't get a chance to talk about this, but it's important when we have you back on before the primaries, because I want to talk about having the DNC listen to you about early primaries for the state in 2028. So let's try to get you back on in the next couple of weeks before the primaries for the state take place, if that works for you, so we can talk about that, because that's an important topic. Curtis Hertel, thank you so much for coming on this morning. Michigan's so important to us here in Illinois, and I want to do everything I can with my show to amplify the work that you guys are doing and make sure that we get to take back all those spots that you lottery listed earlier that are available for us to win. So thanks for taking some time to be with us this morning.
Thank you, my friend. Appreciate you having me on.
We'll talk again soon, okay?
Yep, I look forward to it.
All right, bye now. Quick break, guys. 773-763-9278 is the number. You're listening to Choose Views on WCPT AM 820 in Chicago, 1520 AM 103.5 FM in Warren County, North Carolina, and AM 950, the progressive voice of Minnesota. When we come back, we got a bunch of professors that are going to be hanging out with us. I'm Richard Chu. We'll be right back.
Richard Chu's got his eyes on the truth, and you're right where you need to be. This is Choose Views.
All right, guys, welcome back to the show. I am so excited to speak with our next 2 guests. One you guys are familiar with. He's been on our show a number of times. He is the author of Why Everyone Hates White Liberals, Including White Liberals. He is one of my favorite professors, period. Professor Kevin Schultz is the head of history and history department at the University of Illinois Chicago. And we've got a special guest joining us today talking about our little segments that we've been doing on America at 250. And that is none other than Associate Professor Ronnie Grinberg, who is also one of those great historians, also a great author. I want to welcome you both to the show. Professor Schultz, good to see you again. This is kind of our Friday date, the mid-morning date that we have. Good to see you.
Good to see you too. One of my favorite dates of the week.
That's right. That's right. Professor Grimberg, welcome to the show. I mean, what you must be out of your mind to join us this early in the morning because you're in Colorado, so you got that extra hour or that less hour. But I know that folks like you get up a little bit early to do what you got to do. Welcome to the show.
Thank you. I'm really happy to be here. I went to Northwestern and was born in Chicago, so I'm happy to join the show.
Yes, that's right. Well, we've been fortunate to have listeners from all over the country speak so highly and be energized when Professor Schultz has been on and talking about his book, obviously, and all the other great work that he does. Professor Grimberg, take a moment and kind of introduce yourself to our audience so they have a little bit better firsthand knowledge of you and what you've been working on these years. Let our audience know a little bit more about you.
Sure. I'm a professor, an associate professor of history at the University of Oklahoma. I always like to say I reside in Oklahoma, but I'm not originally from there, but I've been there a very long time. I recently wrote a book that's called Write Like a Man, Jewish Masculinity in the New York Intellectuals, which is about a group of, at one time, very well-known writers and critics in the 20th century. Many of them were Jewish men. And thinking about, it's also a story about Jewish masculinity and how ideas of about masculinity influenced American intellectual life. And I'm working on an edited volume with Kevin, who has been a good friend and colleague and mentor for more years than I care to admit now, on an American Jewish intellectual tradition. So we've been in touch a lot. And my next book is actually looking at the history of feminism as a sort of intellectual movement and the role of Jewish women, secular Jewish women in it. But that's very early on in my research process.
Well, it's good to have a colleague that you can truly say is a colleague, no matter how long you've been there. I guess probably the beauty of that, Professor Grimberg, is the longer you've been colleagues, the longer you can go back in the Wayback Machine and say, "Oh yeah, Kev's been he's been riding with me for a while. He's still riding with me. Is he the crazy one or am I the crazy one? But either way, you guys are still riding along. That's the good thing, I would say. That's the good thing.
Definitely.
It's like you and I now, Richard. You were the first person to wish me Happy Father's Day on Father's Day.
Wow.
Lord, quicker than my kids.
Well, I'm glad I was able to do that, and you know, I sent to the men that I have great respect for that message because I'm a strong believer in giving everybody their flowers when you give them to them. You don't wait. My aunt told me this years ago, Professor Grimberg. I was running around the house. I think I was 15 years old. I was running around the house, all like worried about making sure that I got a gift, a late gift on Saturday from my mother for Mother's Day, which was the next day. And my aunt was visiting us, and I asked her, could she give me a ride to the grocery store because I wanted to get flowers for my mother. And so she did. We went and got the flowers, and on the way back, she said, "So I want to tell you something. This is something you should keep with you for the rest of your life. Don't wait for a holiday or a birthday or a day to give people and she didn't say flowers, but to give people their love. Show them their love all the time." And, that stayed with me. And that's why I made a point of reaching out to Doc Kev and so many other guys to let them know, yeah, it's Father's Day, but we appreciate what you do all the time. Professor Grimberg, you have been one of those voices that has just been relentless about making sure that we're plugged into our history. And when it comes to religion, you two both have really sort of set the standard when it comes to talking about how religion we can't get away from it. Whatever the faith is, whether it's Protestantism, whether it's Judaism, whether it's the Muslim faith, whatever it is, it's such an incredibly interwoven part of our history. So we'll start with you, Professor Grimberg. Talk about what religion and how religion has been a part of your history, both from a professional standpoint and also on a personal level.
Well, that's a really good question. Well, I study one of the things I study is the history of American Jews. The book that I wrote about was about a group of Jewish intellectuals. Now, many of those figures were secular, and so sometimes when we talk about Jewishness, it's definitely always tied to the religion of Judaism. But Judaism has many different dimensions, and how people practice it in the United States also has various different formulations. And when I moved to Oklahoma, when I first taught in Oklahoma, which is a pretty Christian state, I sort of was used to sort of saying secular Jews. When I introduced my class and said, we're going to talk about American Jews, the history from the first landing of Jews in the United States in 1653, I believe.
53,
and through the present. But I said, we're going to talk about the religion, we're going to talk about Judaism, we're going to talk about the development of Reform, Judaism and Orthodox and conservatism, but we're also going to talk about Jews as an ethnic group and what Jewish identity has meant in the United States and how it has changed and how it's, it can mean. It's complicated, actually. But one of my students on the first day, I had come from teaching in Chicago as a graduate student at Northwestern, then teaching in Colorado, which is where I'm from. So I'm at my parents' house. So happy Father's Day to them too. But I first taught at the University of Colorado in Boulder, also after my graduate degree before moving to Oklahoma. And I took for granted that people understood what secular Jews meant. I said, we're going to talk about secular Jews as well, and Jews as an ethnic group. And I had a student raise their hand and say, what's a secular Jew? It didn't comprehend, right? And they said, are there secular Christian? Like that idea that
that modifying
religion,
word. Yeah, go ahead. Sorry.
Yeah, exactly. And it really like blew open my mind because I had never lived in a part of the country, I guess like Oklahoma, where there are so few Jews as a group, really, and that I had taken that concept for granted. So I think now I don't know if I answered your question, but that's part of it. And then, my own background was that I grew up Jewish, the child of immigrants. My mother's Israeli. My father's actually a Mexican Jew, born and raised. All my grandparents were Holocaust survivors. And in Israel, there's a clash there's always been a clash between Orthodox Jews, but then also many Israelis are secular.
Mm-hmm.
So my mother was secular, politically, very on the left. But when my parents got to the United States, they had to figure out how to raise Jewish kids. And in Israel, it's sort of, if you're growing up in Israel, I mean, it's complicated, but if you're growing up in Israel, sort of, you take for granted in some way Jewishness the same way that we take for granted Christian identity in the United States, because it was founded as a Jewish state. Again, it's very complicated. There are other groups there, but that's the de facto religion. And so my parents had to, they got here and they said, well, that doesn't work in the United States. And so, they signed up to go to a synagogue, and they decided to go to a conservative synagogue because they speak Hebrew, and Reform, you speak English. And I went to Hebrew school. And how I got into the subject that I study, I wrote a dissertation. A subset of the New York intellectuals were neoconservatives. And so I initially was interested in, or I still am, but when I began that project many, many years ago, it was during the George W. Bush administration, and neoconservatism was a hot word. Yeah. And the history of conservatism in the United States was a topic that historians were trying to grapple. This is still very much the case 25 years later, or however long it's been. But what ended up happening is I found that a lot of the founding neoconservatives were secular Jews. And then that led me to this group called the New York Intellectuals. And so, I do feel like, I didn't set out to study American Jews. I was trained as a U.S. historian in 20th century, and maybe an aspect of my identity and combined with trying to understand American politics at the present sort of led me to the subject.
Yeah. So fascinating. We're going to take a quick break. When we come back, Professor Schultz, I want to kind of lean into this conversation around where things changed historically in the 20th century with regard to faith, and how we've tried to find the intersections between Christianity Judaism, and others. So let's take a quick break. 773-763-9278 is the number. You're listening to Choose Views on WCPT, AM 820 in Chicago, WAR 1520 AM and 103.5 FM from Warren County, North Carolina, and our good friends at AM 950, the progressive voice of Minnesota. I'm Richard Chu. We'll be right back. All right, guys, welcome back to Choose Views, 773-763-9278. I'm Richard Chu, and we are talking with two great professors, one right here in Chicago, and that is our good friend, Professor Kevin Schultz, as well as Professor Ronnie Grinberg, who's hanging out with us this morning, but she typically does her work at the University of Oklahoma. Before we broke, I said that I wanted to talk a little bit about something that is a deep part of our history when it comes to faith. FDR said, and I'm paraphrasing, basically, we as a Protestant nation are kind of leaving behind that, and it's important that we connect with other faiths. Professor Schultz, help me tie that together. You know the words more eloquently than I do of what FDR was saying about religion and the history of religion and how we as a country are moving in a direction that should bring us together. Talk a little bit about that for us.
Yeah, look, we as a collection of historians are going bananas right now as it's the 250th birthday of the Declaration of Independence, and we've got all this Christian nation talk. But if we're going to celebrate the Declaration of Independence and the other big founding document, the Constitution, it's kind of curious. Let's look at what it might have to say about religion in America and what it might portend for us being a Christian nation, if we are such a Christian nation, and what that might mean, which a lot of the Republican Party has relied on, especially as they needed the votes of the religious right since 1979. And the gist of it is, to give away the ending, is basically neither of those two founding documents, the Declaration of Independence, happy birthday, and the Constitution, neither of those documents are very religious at all. Mm-hmm. It's not at all in the Declaration of Independence. And in the Constitution, God talk appears basically 4 times. One is the year of our Lord. And all the other times that it gets mentioned is to acknowledge religious pluralism in what they're creating, the United States of America, and to say things like there should be no religious tests required as a qualification to office, or in that famous First Amendment, where all citizens should have free exercise and free right to practice their faith as they see fit, and there will be no national faith.
Right.
So this happened at the height of the Enlightenment. This happened because there were so many different religious faiths in the colonial era. I mean, even the Puritans who came over to set up what Ronald Reagan remembered as the city on a hill, you know that famous story, where we're going to create a Christian nation. Even the Puritans were a religious minority on the boat they sailed in on. They were a religious minority on the boat. So there has been pluralism here forever. The founding fathers, the founding mothers, they all knew this. So our founding documents did not enshrine Christianity at all. And it's actually kind of a funny story. What they did was they gave a lot of power to the states, which we know of, which we all know. And this was part of the acknowledgement and the balance with the 10 amendments, the initial Bill of Rights that came down. And those states could do whatever they wanted to do. And some of those states started imposing other religious tests. Here's a great story for you, Richard. In 1811, there was a man in New York, a guy named Ruggles. That's all we know, is his last name was Ruggles. And he probably was drunk, and he came out of a tavern, and he went out on the streets, and he said terrible things about Jesus Christ and his mother. Jesus Christ was a bastard, and his mother was, and he used a euphemism for a woman who sells her body for money.
Right.
He was arrested for blasphemy, and he said, no way, our founding documents have no religious tests. There's no way you can possibly arrest me. That was his defense. But lo and behold, in the state of New York, he was found guilty for blasphemy because of common order. And they set up something called the moral establishment. And this is the way they could get Christianity into the American sort of law, American norms. And so through the states, through good, normal Christian order, they imposed some Christianity throughout the 19th century. Now, this was fine in some ways because you need to have some central moral boundaries or whatever until they recognized that this country was a nation of immigrants leading all sorts of religious groups here, including a lot of the Jews that Ronnie's written about and the Muslims that came after the Great Immigration Act of 1965 and the Mormons and the Catholics and the seculars. We could go on and on and on. And that has ever since has been something that is pounding on this notion that the religious right upholds today, that we are a Christian nation, whatever that would mean. And all these religious minorities have been saying for 250 years, well, wait a minute, that doesn't make any sense. And we're not really a Christian nation.
No. You know,
so yes, go ahead.
I have to ask, well, this question has always been, kind of on my mind. And I think I'll go back to a story that I may have told before. I'll try to get to it real quickly. One morning, a lot of things happened at age 15. About 2 weeks prior to the conversation I shared earlier about my car ride to the store to get flowers for my mother with my aunt, I had a conversation with my dad because I said one morning, I said, Dad, I don't want to go to church this morning. And I grew up going to a Baptist church. And he said, why? And I told him, I said, I'm not learning. I don't think I'm learning anything. I said, I don't feel like I'm really getting anything from it. I don't feel like I'm focused there, whatever. And my father said, okay. Sitting in the chair and in the bed in their bedroom, he said, you don't have to go. When you're ready to go again, you'll go. And I said, okay, cool. Edited version. Later on, he asked me, he said, this is probably 15 years later, he said, what drove you to that? And I said, I just didn't feel like I was learning anything because I felt like it was always a situation where we were made to feel bad rather than feeling good. And I said, sometimes what I feel like with religion, organized religion, irrespective of the faith, and I said, because at that point, I had gone to a variety of different churches. And I said, it's dogmatic. It makes people feel guilty. It should be, I believe, if God represents this sort of power of inspiration, that it should always be about inspiration. It should always be about helping us feel better. So where am I going with this? Right now, what I feel that the right is trying to do with religion, let me be more specific, with a Christian nation, is to make people feel guilty and bad and sorrowful if you don't acquiesce to Christianity in the United States of America. And that, to me, is extraordinarily harmful. And I think it's one of the reasons why people have been pushing back from it, probably more than it being a Christian. You could say we're a Jewish nation or we're a Muslim nation, and people would push back because it's about harming people more so than it is about helping people. Dr. Grimberg, I'm going to put the baton in your hand and tell us what you think about what I just said in my non-religious way.
I think you're absolutely, just building off of what both you and Kevin said, Jews were always a minority in the United States, a minority religion. But when they came to the United States, they were not the quintessential other. They were so small in numbers also. So the quintessential other in the United States had always, fallen on the issue of race. To some extent. And so Jews had a very different experience when they came to the United States. And that's not to say that anti-Semitism wasn't present. Historians now, especially in American or in Jewish, in the field of Jewish studies and in American Jewish history, are kind of going back and looking at the history of anti-Semitism because for a long time there was a feeling in the United States that it hadn't been very powerful. And I think, and that actually that it had disappeared. There was a book in 1994 that had been considered the text that sort of let Jews in the United States prospered because of this pluralistic nation, because of this freedom of religion. And I think many people felt that way until recent years when there's been an uptick in anti-Semitism. And so now there's a whole scholarly literature that is kind of popping up, trying to trace maybe a more complicated history. Mm-hmm. But I do think that from the very beginning, Jews found that the United States was in many ways different from their experiences in Europe. In Europe, Jews had to live by law and decree before the Enlightenment as separate communities. They were the quintessential other that a Christian Europe sort of saw as, a minority group that couldn't assimilate. And that just wasn't the case in the United States for all sorts of more complicated reasons. And, when Jews first got here, in some ways, there was more animus against Catholics than there were against Jews.
Yeah.
Because I think you're right.
Because Catholicism, because Catholicism was viewed as an anti-religion to the Protestant faith, if I have my facts correct.
Absolutely. I mean, Kevin can say more on that too. And, Jews were such a small number until really the later 19th century that they were, many Americans maybe didn't know that much about Judaism, but they saw, they didn't see it as a threat, at least initially. Oh, Kevin's raising his hand. And Jews, tied their history also to, well, I'll let Kevin go ahead, actually. Kevin, go.
One thing I just want to add, I know we got to go to commercial break here in a second, is that there is this startling fact that more than 80% of Americans who consider themselves evangelicals voted for Donald Trump. And this gets to what you were talking about, Richard, about how this religion, how any religion, and Christianity especially, which seems to be sort of focused on the teachings of Jesus Christ, would be able to manifest itself in having 81% of its adherents, or at least the more conservative adherents, vote for Donald Trump. And it is interesting. It speaks to sort of what Ronnie is. It speaks to an anxiety. It speaks to a fear. It speaks to a certain kind of Christianity. And that's the point I want to draw from you, is that, Richard, I don't know where you land today on matters of faith, but I do think there is an aspect of faith that can be used to bring people together, that can be used to turn the other cheek, that can be used to enhance and grow the commonweal. And there are aspects of faith that do the exact opposite, that say my narrow doctrinaire way is the only way, and we need to create laws and create structures that adhere to that particular way. And I think that is fueled largely by both a sense that this is actually true and also a variety of anxieties. And so a lot of scholars have spent a lot of pages trying to figure out how 81% of evangelicals who supposedly believe in the teachings of Jesus Christ, our Lord and Savior, could then vote for Donald Trump. And they talk about this culture of a big man who's going to save them from the pluralism that Ronnie was just talking about, from the fact that there is all of this difference in our great nation, and that the circle of we, which you and I have been arguing for a long time, can be expanded wider and wider and wider by the ideals that are put forward in our Declaration of Independence and our Constitution. They see that as very, very limited. And I think that's the battle that we're seeing, and religion is just the battleground.
Yeah. Where is the right place to be in the space that we occupy when it comes to faith? Thank you both. I know that Professor Kevin's going to stay with us. It's good to meet you, Professor Grinberg. We will do this again. You're a nice new voice to have in our conversation. So thank you for taking some time to hang out with us. We're going to let you go. We're going to take a quick break. And when we come back, we're going to keep part of the conversation going with Barb McQuade. 773-763-9278 is the number. You're listening to Choose Views on WCPT, AM 820 in Chicago, and WARR 1520 AM, and 103.5 FM from Warren County, North Carolina, as well as our good friends at AM 950, the progressive voice of Minnesota. I'm Richard Chu, and we'll be right back. Guys, welcome back to Choose Views. If you're just tuning in, I'm Richard Chu, and we were just talking with Professor Ronnie Grinberg, who is out there at the University of Oklahoma and author of Write Like a Man, Jewish Masculinity, and the New York Intellectuals. And along with us today, being that it's another Friday with Professor Kevin Schultz from the University of Illinois in Chicago is with us. And who else? Man, what's her name? Barb McQuade is joined us as well this morning. Barb's been with us before, and she has been just very, very busy because of her podcast. She's been very, very busy in terms of her latest book, The Fix: America, Man, the Corruption of a Mob-Style Government. That's where we are. I had a chance to hang out with Barb about 2 weeks ago. She was here in Chicago, and heard her speak so well about not just what's happening in the country legally, but how her book has really been a kind of a call that we got to pay attention to what's going on with how we not only identify the problems that are happening with this administration, but how we fix our government at large on a legal in some of the legal things that we aren't doing well enough. Barb, welcome back to the show. Professor Schultz, welcome to the show, and greetings to both of you.
Thanks, Richard. Great to be with both of you.
Yes. Professor Schultz, thanks for hanging out with us a little bit longer. I know this was part of our plan. Barb, what we've been doing the last couple of weeks is with the anniversary of the country, 250, we've kind of done some small segments, America at 250. And the previous segment, we were talking with Professor Grinberg about religion, about the Jewish faith, about interfaith, and I guess we'll call it tri-faith that Professor Schultz has written about and talked about. And one of the things that's interesting, and when we have lawsuits, oftentimes we reference that in those suits, or I shouldn't say in those lawsuits, but in the writing of the suit, the lawsuit itself, oftentimes there's references to not faith or religion, but where God kind of sits in the process, and it's in so much of our writing legally. In your career as an attorney, as an author, as a professor, how have you tried to navigate around religion when it comes to dealing with legal matters?
Well, I have always been part of the view of the separation of church and state when it comes to the laws of our country, when it comes to our institutions of government. But of course, one of the things that our Constitution does enshrine is the right for each of us to freely exercise our own religion. And so from time to time, that creates a conflict because the government can't establish a religion, but we also have to respect everybody's free exercise of religion. And I think many of us, there's certainly people who are agnostic or atheists, and that is something to be respected in our system as well. But I suppose other than that group, all of us are guided not only by our legal responsibilities, but our religious faith, our goals to, love others as we love ourselves. That's part of it. But I think that is not inconsistent with what our laws do. Our laws are all about choosing to balance various values. I think when it comes to the criminal law, for example, those values are individual liberty on the one hand and public safety on the other. And regardless of one's religion or absence of religion, we have to respect the laws that are enacted by our legislatures at the federal, state, and local level, even if we may disagree with them from our own moral perspective. So, people likely have very strong views on reproductive rights and abortion based on their religious views. People have different views about the LGBTQ rights that some states give to our fellow citizens. And you may have what's the phrase they often use, a sincerely held religious belief that gay rights are a violation of your religious views. And that's fine. You can have your own religious views, but you have to respect the laws that were passed by our government, even when they might conflict with your religious views. And I think that's where we've seen, in my opinion, some parting of the ways of that separation of church and state over the past several years.
It's a threading of the needle that has become really an interesting threading, because that is exactly going back to what Professor Schultz has said so many times about. We have to understand how our history, the history of the country, has created so many different pockets for us to operate in. But when we don't recognize sometimes there's separations, i.e. separation of church and state, or separating other parts of our humanity, we end up crossing some lines. And right now the country is, I don't want to say on a tipping point, but we're certainly going down this path where religion, or more specifically Christianity, is becoming almost a, and I said this earlier, kind of in a different way, Barb, it's almost becoming a weapon that many people are using that to some extent to sort of supersede law, if that makes any sense. Do you see where I'm going with that?
Well, I do. And, I don't want to overstate the case, but I spent a good part of my career as a federal prosecutor focusing on national security cases. And one of the things we saw about the Islamic State was the effort to put religion above the law, that religion was the law. And certainly people are entitled to religious beliefs, but when we're going to live in a pluralistic society, we have to put the law above anybody's individual religious views or religious identity. And I think what we're seeing is a federal government that is pandering to Christianity at the moment. We see renewed efforts to bring, say, the Ten Commandments into our schools. Certainly, the Ten Commandments have their place in everyone's life if you want them to be there. You can teach your children the Ten Commandments, you can post them in your church. But the idea that we're posting them in our schools really says that we are establishing one religion over others or over people's free choice to not worship any religion. Our country was founded on religious liberty. And that means we get to worship as we choose. But if you are a child and you show up in school and you see the school favoring one religion or another, it's hard to say that that's really religious liberty, which is supposed to allow Muslims and Jewish students and people of all faiths or no faith to stand equal at the law. So I agree with you that I think we're seeing this rise of Christian nationalism, and I think in part because it is still the majority religion in our country, and we've got some politicians in our country who want to pander to that group, which I think is a naked violation of our national and historical values.
Professor Schultz, baton to you in terms of the way in which many politicians now are doing exactly what Professor McQuaid said about using the religious conversation to try to dominate where we are as a country.
I want to say two things based on what Barbara was saying. The first is my favorite response from school teachers in those states that now have mandates to post the Ten Commandments in their classroom is to post the Ten Commandments, which they're legally mandated to do, but then also post posters of different religious faiths and different religious morals. And so it becomes a true reflection of the pluralism and the religious pluralism specifically that is the United States. So they're taking the law and they're just showing how, A, of all, ridiculous it is, and B, of all, how expansive religion has been throughout our history and the world's history. There are many paths up the similar mountain, if we want to think about it that way. So I love it when teachers are doing that kind of activism and that kind of response. And the second thing is, it's easy for us today, I'm a history professor, so it's easy for us today to see the weaponization of Christian faith and Christian ideals, not necessarily to create whatever a Christian nation might happen to look like, which I think would be very different for every Protestant you asked, which is the whole point of Protestantism, but would also it's a tool to put down other faiths and to stoke fear that we're going to have Sharia law in the United States, for instance, or something that is not even plausible. We can't even get Christian laws passed, much less Muslim laws. And there are only 3% of our population or less are Muslims. But I do think there is something really interesting at this intersection that we need to think about. If you take, for instance, the case of the Mormons. In the 19th century, the Mormons widely practiced plural marriage, or polygamy as more commonly know it. And there were all sorts of lawsuits about whether or not this would be allowed in the United States, the land of the free, the land where you should be allowed to practice your faith as you freely see to it. And if these are consenting adults who want to practice plural marriage, why not allow them to? And there was something brought in that it was illegal in the Reynolds case, the famous Reynolds case of 1876, which I'm sure Barbara knows more about than I do. And why? Why was it made illegal? Because there's a sense of our common morality. Okay, now that's a really broad word that is infused with all sorts of religious notions. It's going to be different for you. It's going to be different for me. It's going to be different for Professor Ginsburg. It's going to be different for Professor McQuaid. And so that's really the nexus of a lot of why religion keeps coming up as a spot of contention, and why the Republican Party, and specifically the MAGA component of the Republican Party today, keeps getting purchase on these culture war issues. Because it is plausible to be pro-life. Again, whatever that might mean, it's different to every single person. But there is a way that you can say that this is not just out of my own religious beliefs. It is, but it's also a sense that we shouldn't murder people, and embryos are people. That's sort of the nexus of the argument. So I think there is this squishy area that's being taken advantage of by the religious right to really push a worldview that animates much of MAGA.
that's just profound, what both of you just said. I want to take a break, but when we come back, I want to talk about what you just said, Professor Schultz, as it relates to something that's in Barb's book and how I've kind of made a dotted line connection. Let's take a quick break, guys. The number is 773-763-9278. You're listening to Choose Views on WCPT AM 820 in Chicago and WARR 1520 AM and 103.5 FM from Warren County, North Carolina. And guess what? Our good friends at AM 950, the progressive voice of Minnesota. I'm Richard Chu, and we'll be right back. All right, guys, welcome back to Choose Views. If you're just tuning in our last segment today, we are talking with Professors Kevin Schultz and Professor Barbara McQuade. Henry and I were just singing your praises about you both have this superpower, and that's to take this thing that's complicated and up on high and bringing it down and making it really simple for people to grab onto. So I really appreciate, and that's one of the things I get excited about having you on, whether it's together or this for this first time or separately. So thank you both to that. I can't let that slip by without acknowledging it. And we're in the weeds this morning, so we're talking about religion and law in the same conversation. Barbara, you made one of your in your latest book, The Fix. You talk about creating guardrails for democracy, such as reforming ethics rules and ethics laws. And when I think about that as it relates to where we are with religion and how it has become such a dominant part of the political conversation, do we need to tighten up? And I guess it's a close-in question, but how do we tighten things up? You talked about this when you were here in Chicago, that there's part of our legal system that we just need to strengthen and tighten up. Are we there when it comes to faith too? Do we need to create some guardrails that say, no, we can't allow religion to supersede its place in the hierarchy of our laws? Does that make sense, Barb?
Yeah, the question makes sense, but it's a very challenging one. You know, some of the guardrails I propose are things more along the lines of anti-corruption and anti-abuse of the Justice Department to go after political rivals as opposed to honoring the rule of law. But I think honoring the rule of law also means honoring the Establishment Clause that says that our government may not establish any one religion over another, and honoring the Free Exercise Clause. What we've seen in recent years, I think, is this pandering by the executive branch to attract votes and to try to elevate one religion over another. And I think we've seen a Supreme Court that's been very sympathetic to this. You know, they've had some decisions in recent years that have elevated religious views over LGBTQ rights, for example, with, you know, website designers and cake makers, and even a football coach who prays after football games on the 50-yard line. And so I think that we could perhaps think about enacting some statutes that address those things, because one of the things that's always important to keep in mind is that although we have these rights in the Bill of Rights, which are some of our core values, no right is absolute. And if the government, Congress, has a compelling reason and can frame a statute that is narrowly tailored to address that reason, then it's still appropriate to restrict some of those rights, including First Amendment rights. I mean, for example, although we have a right to free speech, Congress has passed laws that meet constitutional muster for things like prohibiting perjury or prohibiting threats. Because even though we have a First Amendment right, those address a compelling governmental reason, right? Protecting the integrity of our courts or protecting people from the fear that comes with threats. And the statutes are very narrowly tailored to address that. And so I think we could have findings that say, despite people's religious views, we as a society want to protect the civil rights of the LGBTQ community. And here are statutes that are narrowly tailored to achieve that. You can believe whatever you want in your personal life. You don't have to marry someone of the same sex if you choose not to. But we as a society are going to permit these things. And if you are going to have a business that's open to the general public, you can't refuse to take the business of people because you're going to be serving a wedding that includes marriage equality. In the same way, we've reached a point in society where you would never allow a cake maker or a website designer to refuse to provide services for an interracial couple. We've reached a point where we consider that to be normalized. Why is it we instead allow this shoving down our throats of the Establishment Clause that says if you care about LGBT rights, then you can still be discriminated against by a cake maker or a website designer, even though we have laws to protect that. So I think that there are things that we can do that would make modest intrusions on our right to free exercise of our religion, but we're doing so to honor the civil rights of other members of our country.
Wow. Kevin, what do you think in that space in terms of that guardrails, but are we getting into some murky waters here?
I think Barbara's right that we do need guardrails for sure. It's obviously murky waters because one person's religion is also the common sort of accepted norm. And why is it that way? So I do think we need to have some collective guardrails. And one of the things, Richard, that you and I have talked about a lot is recognizing the great pluralism of the United States and coming up with a way to protect people and individuals so that they can exercise their rights. I do want to acknowledge one thing that Barbara said about this this particular Supreme Court, the Roberts Court, favoring a lot of religious practice. But I do want to say that even though it was a narrow decision yesterday as far as the language that they used, they made it pretty clear that it's only for Christians. The case that was handed out yesterday was giving the state of Louisiana, or at least the guard at a prison in the state of Louisiana, the right to shave off Rastafarian's dreadlocks, which he grew out as part of his religious practice. And he had several lower courts decide in his favor. Obviously, these were his rights, but the Supreme Court upheld the actual guard's ability to do this and protected him under the law. So it seemed a little bit curious that the Supreme Court would be willing to protect some people's faiths, but not other people's faiths. I also want to just simply acknowledge that I do think this overreach that we're seeing both from the Roberts Court and from the MAGA movement in general is finally, and we've talked about this before, Richard, is finally having blowback. I think we're going to see a core group of 15 to 20% of Americans who are going to die on the hill of MAGA, not literally, but that's their core foundational belief. And as each overreach happens, both coming from the Supreme Court, if people pay attention to it, and also from the Trump administration itself, it is bleeding people. I have some anecdotal evidence, some people who are very close to me who once upon a time supported President Barack Obama, and then they got access to Facebook, and lo and behold, they became MAGA people, have just this last month given up on the MAGA movement. We used to wonder if MAGA, is it about bringing about sort of the religious rights demand? Is it about bringing about the small government, the libertarian component of the right wing? And what we've learned in the last 6 months, and many of us suspected all along, is it's about neither of those things. It's basically a mafioso style oligarch to enrich the people that are already in power. And they will use religious faith in order to win votes. They will use libertarian language and the notion of small government while they impose tariffs and have wars that nobody asked for. So I do think there's an exhaustion from the voter base. I have anecdotal evidence that this is true. My in-laws, and so I'm actually heartened by the fact that whatever it is that's finally causing these people to lose the blinders, they're recognizing that they're being used in the name of corruption and oligarchic self-enrichment.
The corruption isn't corrupting anymore, Barb, and maybe the fix is, going to be one. I don't say maybe, Henry. The fix is one of our tools to help us move along in this conversation, as is Everyone Hates White Liberals, including white liberals. I have the authors of those two books Professor Barbara McQuaid has been with us this morning, and Professor Kevin Schultz has been with us again. I am honored. You guys know I mean that when I say it. It's not just saying it to sound good, to be able to hang out with you guys. Thanks so much for taking some time on this Friday to take us through some historicals on law and on religion and on faith. So thank you both for being with us this morning.
Thanks, Richard. Thanks, Kevin. Great to be with you both.
All right. You guys have a great weekend. Stay safe. And I know, Kevin, we'll see you next week. And Barb, we'll see you when you see you. But stay safe as always, okay?
Okay, thanks.
All right, guys. Bye now. What can I tell you? I say it all the time. I'm so grateful and honored to have folks like Barbara McQuaid and Professor Kevin Schultz on the show. They are great authors. They're great people that have done their best to keep us informed at a time when there's a lot of attempt to not let us be informed, to keep us uneducated, to keep us, stupid, if you will, and keep us not plugged into things that matter. And I also want to give thanks to Curtis Hertel for being with us earlier in the show, as well as Ronnie Grinberg, Associate Professor at the University of Oklahoma, and our good friend Karen Byrne from True Blue Politics Podcast. Everybody, you guys are amazing, and thanks for hanging out with us on this Friday. Henry and Maddie B kept us on the rails, y'all. Everybody have a good weekend. Stay tuned for the Stephanie Miller Show. And remember, take a deep breath and make your life count. We'll see you next week.